In this video, we're going to dive into one of the most practical skills in Python, reading and writing files. Whether it is a .txt file, a .csv file, or a .json file, Python makes it super easy. So stick around because we're going to build a mini app that is going to read and write from a file and process the content and save it in different formats, which is a really important skill that we're going to need to extend the functionality of some of the applications that we've been building so far. So we're going to start with something quite simple. We're going to start with how you can read and write .txt files, and just switch to your code editor. And quickly we'll get started on this. I'll just pull up my terminal just in case. Now, to write into a file, there are different methods that we use, but the main one, which is what I'm going to focus on, is how to using what you call the with operation. So what you do is you just say with, then you'll say with open. Now open is a method or a function, and it takes in two arguments. It's going to take in the name of the file that you want to open. So in this case, you can write the name of the file. Let's say I write a name like notes.txt. Once you've written the name of the file, you have to specify the mode with which you want to open the file. So there are multiple modes. Some of these modes is you want to open a file in write mode, you want to open a file in read mode. Ideally, the same way you'd open files in your machine, there are certain files that once you open them, you're able to edit, or you have the sort of permission to edit those files. Others, when you open them, you can't edit them. So it is a sort of a similar thing that we're doing here. So you have to specify the mode. So in this case, I'd like us to start with write mode. So to represent write mode, you just type in a W. So that means you're going to be opening the file in write mode. Then you'll say you're opening as file. So what this means is you're opening this file, but you're opening it as a file. So file is the, let's call it the variable that you're storing this. So let's do this again. So what you're going to do, how you normally open it, which is using this for explanation. I wouldn't advise you to do it this way because it has a lot of extra operations that you have to carry on. You'll say you define a variable called file, and then you will open the file. So you just use the open method. Then you'll specify the name of the file, say text.txt. Then you'll specify the mode that you want to open this file. Let's say you want to open it in read mode. So what you are referring to this line in line 1, that is what is happening in line 3 as well. So you're saying that you want to open this file, opening it as file. So you will be referring to everything here as file. So I do hope that makes sense. Now moving on. Once you have opened the file, there are a number of operations and methods that come with this method that we are using here. So one of that is the dot write method. So if I say file dot write like that, and I specify the message that I want to write. For example, I want to say learn Python with me. Let's say this is the message that I want to write. If I do that, this is going to write a file. Now, let's run this code so you can see what I mean here. So just say Python 3. I call this files.py. Once you hit enter, you'll notice one thing here. On the left panel, when you were starting, we didn't have a notes.txt file, but it has already come up the moment you run our file, and it has the statement learn Python with me. That is happening because we're opening our file in write mode. And since the file did not exist to begin with, it's going to create this file, right? So even when you have a file that already exists, it's going to do in that case is that it's going to override whatever you have in that file, and then you'll have the new statements that you have specified. So in this case, file.write, then that is going to happen. You can go ahead and add some extra statements if you wanted to. For example, I'm going to just add \n so that we can have a new line here. So we'll just say file.write. Then we can specify any other statement that you want to write. Let's say this other statement is going to be files are super useful. So let's say that is the statement that you want to say. Then again, I'll just add another \n so that there's a new line that's going to be added. So if we do this and we run our code again, I want you to notice what is happening here. This is what our file looks like right now. Now let's run our code. Once we run this, you'll notice that it has added the other line of code, right? Of course, it's in different lines because we used a \n here. So you have files are super useful. There's all this that is happening. But one thing you're going to note, and you're going to see this over the next few lessons, we're going to talk about file handling. When you use the write mode, it's going to always overwrite everything that you have in a specific file. So you always have to be really, really careful when it comes to how you use this mode. Now, let's talk about another mode that you can read. So you can also open a file in read mode. So far, we've been just writing to the file, but you can also read contents of a file. With that, you just again, you need to open the file that you want to read, of course. So you'll say with open, you'll specify the name of the file. In this case, I want us to just read the notes.txt file. But the thing that changes here now is the mode that you're opening the file in. So in this case, you're opening it in read mode, which you represent with R. Then just say as file. Then once you've done this, you can now specify what you want to do. So you want to read the contents. So I'll just create a variable called content, and I'll store into this the contents of that you are reading. So in this case, you'll just say file dot read. So this is another method that the open method comes with. The open comes with. So once you do this, you write the file, and you can just print another statement. This is just for formatting, honestly, just to tell the user that these are the contents of the file, right? So you don't have to do this. You can just go ahead and just print content directly. Now, what I want to do is I just want to disable or comment out this part here so that it doesn't keep on updating the file, so that you can just read directly. If you do this, let's run our code. Once you do that, you notice that it has printed the contents of the file in our terminal here. Learn Python with me, files are super useful, and even the new line that we added here. So this is what opening a file, rather reading and writing text files looks like. You can go ahead and do many other things. However, one thing I should mention as we start is when we're using earlier on, when you're using just the open method like this, then you store it in a variable. If you do that, you always have to manually close your file. And to close your file, usually there's a method that known as the .close method that you always have to call. So if I open a file, my file like this, I just do this again. So I open a file and I use the open method, and I specify the name of the file. If I specify the name of the file like example .txt, and I'm opening this file, let's say in write mode. Okay, it should be like that in write mode. I open okay, it's just like that. Don't need to use as file because I'm storing that directly to that variable. So if I do this, then I carry out any other operation that I want to carry out. I always have to call file.close at the end of my code. So, or rather in this specific context, so I always have to call these despite any operation that I've done in between, right? And again, sometimes you can forget to do that. You always have to do this for security purposes as well. But doing all this, it's a lot of work. Sometimes you even forget to do that, right? So that is the beauty of using with open, because with open handles the closing automatically. So that is why it is important to just stick to this. You're going to find some people are using this in case you do some research online, but always stick with it with open because it handles closing files automatically. So this is what we've just done right now is perfect for writing logs. If you want to save some notes or just some basic data. Now, apart from using .txt file text files, you can also work with CSV files. Yeah. So how you work with CSV files? I'm going to okay. The first thing you need to do is you need to import CSV. Now, this is the one of the things you need to learn as well. Whenever you're working with files, imports always happen at the top level. So you always have to do the imports at the top level of your file. So in this case, I'm going to just import CSV. The reason we need to do this is because this is not sort of it's a method you have to, or rather it's a module that you have to import so that you can use it in Python, right? So it's not sort of already magically inbuilt, so you can just use it. For example, the way we're using .txt. I do hope that makes sense. Now, working with CSV files, still the same thing that like what you've done here, but now let's just open again. So we'll just say with open, then you specify the file, but now the extension of course has to be .csv. So we'll just say users.csv. Now if you're wondering what CSV files are, CSV files, think of them like when you're using Excel sheets, the kind of data that you export from Excel sheets, that is that it's in CSV format. So Just think of it in that along those lines. So we want to also open a CSV file, but we want to open it in write mode. And once we've opened it in write mode, we can just open as file like this. Now, there are many other things that you can do, which is something that you can also do even with the others. You can always add a new line. So you'll just do comma, then we'll say new line. So new line, then you'll have just an empty string right there. So you can always do that. Then once you've done this, to write into a CSV file, now we use the CSV module that we just imported in line one. How you do that is, of course, you just need to store it in a file. I'll just call this writer. You'll check the CSV, then you'll say csv.writer. So writer is a method that comes with it. Then you specify what you want to write. You want to write file, which is what you have from the first line here, this file. So csv.writer file, like that. Then once you've done this, you can now specify the kind of data that you want to write. You can even always specify the rows that you want this data to go to. It's you can always just do all that. So let's start with something simple. Let's say we want to write a row. So what it will do, we'll just take writer, the writer that the variable that we just have there. Then we just say writer.write row. Writer.write row. Again, it's a method. Write row is a method that you have to call. So .write row, and you specify what you want to write in that row. It's going to be in the form of a list. So we're going to have, for example, name. Let's say you want to have age. Again, this is, you can always format it however you'd like. So you have age, and it's a city. So if you have this as the first line in your CSV file, then you can have the data that fits each of these columns that you've just created in the row. So you can do that again. So we'll just say writer dot write row, writer dot write row, just like that. Again, you call it the same thing, then you'll write your information matching what you have on the first line. So if someone's name is, let's say, Alice, and you'll have their age. Again, age is a number, so you don't have to make it a string. You can make it 25, and their city is, let's say, Nairobi. If this is what you have now, if we once we run this code, we should be able to see this file get created. And I want you to note what happens on the left panel here, right? So again, okay, we can just leave this on, or we comment it out for now. Okay, then let me clear and run our code again. So once we run this, you notice that there's a users.csv file that has been created here on the left panel. And you can open it. Once you open it, you'll see this is the information that we just created here. So the information that we just updated here. So this is how you do it with CSV files. Again, the sort of, you have to use the import CSV module and start using it. Reading from this file is still the same thing that you can do. So for example, okay, I'm just going to copy this so that I don't have to repeat writing the code. So what you'll do with write, you'll specify here, you'll specify that you want to open it in, not write but read. You'll open it in read mode, and I'll just remove this because we don't need it anymore. We're just reading the file. Then when it comes to here, you'll use the .reader method. So we'll just say csv.reader, and I'll just update this to variable to reader as well. So you'll use csv.reader, and once you've done that, you can read through the file. Now, this is where some of the skills that we've done, everything we've learned before, also comes in. When you read through the file, notice that you have multiple lines of code that you have here. So you can think of iterating through those lines so that you can see what is happening at each row. You can use a simple for loop. So you can just say for row in reader, for row in reader, you want to print the row, like that. Again, this simply is going to go through the file and get you print everything that you can find at each row. So I'm going to just disable this here so you can focus on reading the file only. I write this, rather I run the code, and you see this is what you get: name, age, everything like this. So that is how you work with CSV files, or at least part of it. There are many other methods that you can, many other things that you can do. So, for example, we've used the writer, we've used the writer method here, right? So you can also use dict writer. So what dict writer does is, it adds some, it gives your project, your code and your file a bit more structure. So if I'm going to just undo this again, rather than comment. we used writer here, right? So you can go ahead and switch to using dict writer. So we'll just say dict. This is just, that's just the name. Dict writer. The W is uppercase, like that. So if you say csv.dict writer, then you have the file here, and then now instead of having a new row for your field names, you can have the field names in here. So I'll just copy this so you can see what happens. So you'll have file as the first argument, then the second argument is going to be field name. So you can just say field names, like that. Then what I just pass in, okay, I'm going to pass in the new list, and I can just get rid of this line here. Then what you do is use what you call, we use the right row. So just say right row. But now there are a few things that change once you do this. You can add an option of column if you wanted to, but the main thing that changes is how this data is represented. Instead of representing it as a list the way we're doing it here, we use a dictionary now. So you have opening curly brace and a closing curly brace. Then you specify name, what the name should be. So just have here, okay, just start. You'll specify the name, like that. Okay, there should be a closing, like that. So you'll specify name, Alice. Then the same thing would happen with age. So you can just copy and paste here, really. So okay, what am I doing? Okay, so you'll specify the age there, and then you can have a city here. So again, you just do it as a dictionary so that it matches everything. So it might be just extra code that you write, but it's a bit more clean when you do it this way. So in this case, you can go ahead, and if you try to run our code, let's just run it again. As you can see, we're still getting the information here, but now it has already updated our file. So if you come to CSV, all the information is still there the way it should be, and yeah, so it still works fine, just like what we had in the beginning. There are many other ways that you can extend the use of the dict writer. There are ways that you can, let's say, represent data for multiple rows. So in that case, how you'll represent it, because this is just one row that you're representing here. For multiple rows, you'll use a list of dictionaries. So you'll have multiple dictionaries like this one, but all of them represented in a list. I hope that makes sense. Again, go try it out. The other thing we need to do now is we need to talk about how to work with the JSON files. We've worked with text files, CSV files. Now JSON files are the ones that are remaining. So JSON files, the same thing with CSV files. You always have to import JSON. Just say import JSON, like that. Then once you've imported JSON, you can start using it. We'll use the same thing. So we need to specify, create our data first. So data is going to be in a dictionary. So JSON stands for JSON object. So it's a notation that we use to represent our data. Similar to you would represent data in sort of a dictionary. So in this case, we're going to have, you can have name, then you specify the name. Let's just use Alice like you've been doing from the beginning. Then you'll have age. You also have age, maybe 25, and you can have maybe skills of this person. Then you can represent skills in form of a list because there are multiple of them. So let's say this person can write Python, okay, like that. They can write Python, and they can write maybe they can write JavaScript. So if this is what you have as your data, then you can start writing JSON. How you do it is the same way we've done before. We'll just use the with the open. So we'll just say with the open, and you specify the name of the file that you want. So you need to because you start opening in write mode. So you're going to create a data.json file, and we are opening it in write mode. Of course, we open it as file. Once we do this, the other thing we'll do, we'll just using the JSON that we imported in the beginning. So if you just say json.dump, and what you want to dump to this is the data, and also you need file because this is what we're getting from line 28. Then you can add indentation if you wanted to, but you don't really need to, but it's important for formatting. So if I say just indent and I specify, like give it a value of maybe 4, this should be able to write to the file. Let's run the code and see what happens. Once I run this, you see we have a data.json file, right? If we open this file, you see again the indentation that we mentioned, just 4 spaces. As you can see here, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, this 4 tabs, not spaces really. But yeah, so this is what is happening. You can also, this is in a JSON format. You can add multiple of this if you wanted to. But that is how you write a JSON file. Now, reading a JSON file is similar to what you did in the beginning. I'm going to just copy this again so that you don't have to repeat all the time. Then what you do once you've opened, of course, you open it in read mode, not write. This one you want to just read the file. So you open it in read mode, and then using JSON, we need to load the content from there. So I'm going to set in this variable. We just say JSON dot load. Then you pass in file, because that's, again, we're referring to the file that we're getting there. So you just JSON dot load file. Then you can just print dash JSON data. I'm just doing some simple formatting. If I wanted to, I can just say maybe JSON data like that. Okay, this JSON should be in uppercase. JSON data. You can use a simple F string here, and I'll pass in content like that. Again, you don't have to write it this, so you can just type in content alone. You don't have to format it like that. But if we run our code, you'll see here we get JSON data. This is the data that is in the file. You can see everything. If you go manually looking at the file, this is the data that we have in the file. Now that we've seen this, to understand simply what possibilities of JSON, JSON is used in APIs. It is used in config files, the configuration files. We're going to interact with JSON. You're going to interact with JSON data many times, but it's sort of a primary way with which we represent data that interacts with APIs and the likes. There are many other methods that you can use as well to do this. Now that we've seen how you can be able to write into our files, read into files. Again, this is just simply introduction. So feel free to just refer back and to watch to make sure you understand some of these concepts and the syntax around it. What I want us to do is I want us to build a simple project for using these files. So far, we've seen how we can write TXT, everything. So I'd like us to just build a simple project that is some sort of a data transformer. So basically, what it's going to do is it's going to read a .txt file. Then it's going to save the content in that file in a CSV file, and also store it in a JSON file. So just encompassing everything. Again, this is just to test your understanding, but it doesn't, in terms of applicability, there are many other ways that you can just write everything to apply what you've just done right now. Yeah. So to do this, I'm going to just create a simple file here. I'll call the file, let me call the file, okay, I'm thinking of a name here. Yeah, let me just call it data transformer .py. Again, you can just create your file also like this, or just create it manually from your Visual Studio Code. But again, I'm already used to writing it like this, so that I'm going to just stick to that. Then we go to data transformer.py. You can start doing this. So the first thing we need to do is we need to read the names from the file that we were going to have. We also need to sort of create the file. So let's start with that. Actually, we can just create the file manually. So you can manually create a file, and I'm going to call the file names.txt, and the file is here. Where is it? Yeah. I'll manually add some information into the file. So I'll add maybe 3 names. I'll just add Alice, Bob, and Charlie. Then these are the files that are going to be I'm going to use, or are the names that I'm going to use. Now let's go back to our data transformer.py. We're going to be reading from that file. To read the data from that file, from what you've done up to this point, feel free to pause and try it on your own. Then you can refer back to this. But I'll just say with open, using the open method. Then you specify what you want to open. You want to open names.txt file, and we are opening it in read mode, of course. We're opening it as file. Once we open it as file, we can read it. So we've seen some of the methods that we can use, and the file.read is one of those methods. So I'm going to just we're going to read the names and store them in this variable. So I'll just say file dot read. Now, this is where a few things that we've seen before come in. For example, if I want to remove any extra lines, any white space that is available in the data that we have, I'll use the dot strip method like that. It should be strip, so I'll just call it like that. Then also, I also want to split these words at the comma at each point where they are. To do that, I'll use the dot split method, because again, remember, it's one long sentence as well. So I want to split them at the comma. So this way we get the names. Once we've gotten the names, we can go ahead and write these names to a TXT file if you wanted to. So what you can do is, let's go ahead and, okay, let's start with, first of all, actually just printing the names to confirm that we have everything working. So I'm going to write Python 3 data transformer.py. You see we have the names Alice, Bob, and Charlie. And you'll notice something interesting, yeah? And this is because we use the dot split method. It stores the words and everything in a list. So names is a list of the names, right? So that's okay there. Now let's go ahead and try to write this into a CSV file, or write to a simple CSV file. We'll just say with open, then we'll have the names. So we'll just add the names, create a file called names.csv. And because we're opening it in write mode, it will automatically create the file. So you don't have to worry about anything else here. Then we'll add a new line like that. So we'll open this as a file as well. Then once you've opened it, we'll use the .writer method that we saw earlier on. So I'll just say writer, then we'll just say CSV dot writer. Then we're writing the file here. So the one thing that I need to do is I need to import CSV, because this is a new file that we are working with. So I'll import CSV, and should be CSV like that. Then I can also import JSON. Okay, so once we have this written, we can use the write row. So we'll just say writer dot write row to write information into the row. So I want to create a simple row, and I'll call this row name. Then once you've created the row, we want to write information to that row, right? So what you do is just say for name in names. Remember, names is a list that we are dealing with. So for name in names, we're going to just say writer dot write, should be right, writer dot write row. Then we are writing the name. So we'll just pass in name. So there'll be a name at each row. Okay, it should be name, for name in names, not for names in names. For name in names, and that should work like that. Okay, so let's go ahead and run our code. So once we run this code, we have a names.csv file. If you come here, there's a names.csv file on the left panel. You click on that, you'll notice that the names are there. We have Alice, Bob, and Charlie. You'll notice them carefully. They're already there. So these are the names that we wanted, and that is what we defined, or what we said at this point here. Okay, now that we have our names written down, the next thing that we need to do is write a JSON file, again, just to practice what we've just seen. So we'll say with open. Then in this case, we create a file, and we call it names.json. We are also going to open this file in write mode. Then we'll open it as file. Then we'll just use json.dump as we did in the beginning as well. So json.dump, and we're going to dump in the names. So we can use different ways, but let's look at the dictionary method that we saw. So we'll just say names, then we pass in names from the names variable that we have up there. Then we need a second argument here, which is going to be file, and the third argument is going to be an indentation. So for indentation, you can just play around with it to have a good indentation that you want for your reading. So for example, right now I just want to go with indentation of 2. Once you do this, again, let's try to run it. Once we run, we should have a names.json. It's here. So names.json file has been created, and you can see how the formatting of this also looks like. And that is ideally basically. So I want you to try this with your own names and see also how that works. But I'm going to write some simple comments here to just help you out when you read the code. So remember, the code is available on GitHub. The name, the not the name, but the link to GitHub is just in the description below. So just say step one. So we're just going to we're reading names here. And then this is the second step that you're doing. I don't really have to specify steps, but I just specify because you probably need to follow along well. Then here we are writing to a CSV file. Then the last thing that you're doing here is give it step 3, and we'll say write to a JSON file. Okay, this should be enough comments for us here. Feel free to just format it on your own time at times as well. But with what you have here now, I believe you're in a position where you can be able to work with files in Python. And we've seen how you can just read and write to TXT files or text files, CSV files, JSON files with just a few lines of code. So if this helped rather, just let me know in the comments below. If you feel that there's a specific aspect that you haven't understood and you want me to reiterate on it in a future video, also let me know. But we're going to do a couple of more videos and applications of how to read and write to files, because there are many interesting applications of this. So think of when you are trying to build, for example, the contact application that we built earlier on. You can extend that application further and start storing your contacts in a file. So in maybe a text file or a CSV file or even a JSON if you wanted to. But those are the kinds of applications that you have of these files that you can see here, or what you've covered today. So thank you, and I'll see you on the next one.